Along with cool mornings and golden light, fall welcomes some of the best parts of being in the kitchen. So today I am sharing a few early fall recipes and an autumn pantry checklist. Fall, of course, is the harvest, and I think there's some sense of innate wanting to prepare and cook as we head into cooler and darker days, and of course, eventually into winter. And I find that instinctively, I just want to be in the kitchen more this time of year. And I am starting off fall with one of my favorite recipes, slow cooker apple butter. Making apple butter in the slow cooker takes about 12 hours, and that entire time your house smells like cinnamon and nutmeg, and it smells so good. And this recipe is really easy because all you do is peel and chop the apples. This is about 4.5 pounds of apples. And then you put them in the slow cooker with about a 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, 3/4 cup of dark brown sugar, a tablespoon of cinnamon, a sprinkle of nutmeg. And traditionally apple butter calls for cloves, but I left the cloves out because my husband doesn't like them, and then a pinch of salt. And then you just set your slow cooker to low and let it do its thing for 12 hours. These are store-bought apples, so I'm not going to worry about canning this apple butter. We do go to the North Carolina mountains every year for a family vacation, and last year we picked apples and we're planning on doing it again this year. So once I have those apples, I will preserve those, but this is just for enjoying right now and for celebrating fall. I'll get back to the apple butter later in the video when it is finished, but also it is time for the first sourdough pumpkins of the year. I have a full tutorial on how to make a sourdough pumpkin on my blog over at moonandmagnolia.com. You can check it out there, but I will also be publishing a tutorial about that on YouTube soon, so stay tuned for pumpkin-shaped sourdough. Part of enjoying the fall kitchen is the fall harvest from my garden, but unfortunately, as I have been sharing a lot this year, my garden is a mess, and we had an unnamed storm here on the coast the other day that completely flooded some of the town up to under 3 feet of water, and it knocked over all of my beautiful cut flowers and basically what was left in my garden except a bunch of weeds that I didn't want. So I am taking out the remainder of the cut flowers that I can and what few peppers are left before we tear out this garden and start replanting for fall and over winter. We have some garlic that we're going to plant and hopefully some salad greens and those sorts of things that we can enjoy once the weather cools off. I suppose these are the times during the harvest when you have no harvest that you can be really thankful we have grocery stores. And I always have basil. If you have a garden and you don't know what to grow, just grow basil. It's the gift that keeps on giving. I have a really delicious autumn pizza recipe and homemade cottage cheese recipe to share with you. But before we get into that, let's talk about restocking the kitchen for fall. I think fall is the only time I get excited to restock my pantry. Generally, that's something that's a little annoying and tedious, but this is the time when I switch things out and really start bringing in these warm and cozy flavors and seasonings and spices that smell really good in the house. I am replenishing all of my spices and adding back in any fall flavors. So last year's pumpkin spice is expired. It needs to go. So I got new pumpkin spice, and that's always a good thing to do as the seasons change. See what spices are expired and then replace them if you need to. And then I am making sure all of my spice jars are full and taking note of anything that I am out of. Of course, your fall kitchen essentials might look a little bit different, but I like to have on hand cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, allspice, pumpkin spice, yellow curry, cumin, ginger, thyme, smoked paprika, bay leaves, sage, and a few jars of freeze-dried herbs from our garden. And of course, fall is prime time baking season. I do bake all year long, but it is the most popular time for baking, and I like to be able to bake on a whim. So I would like to make sure this time of year I have all the wheat that I need. So I have whole wheat berries for milling. Right now I have einkorn, hard red winter wheat, and soft white winter wheat. And I also stay stocked up on bread flour, whole wheat flour, all-purpose flour, and rolled oats. And not only do I like to make sure that I am stocked on these flours, I also like to make sure that all of my containers are filled up and ready to go. When baking, it is a lot easier to lug just a single container than a 10-pound bag of flour. Also, for the early fall kitchen, I like to make sure I am stocked up on brown sugar, maple syrup, powdered sugar, honey, molasses, homemade vanilla extract, baking soda, and baking powder. And then there are a few other things I like to keep on hand throughout fall, such as, of course, canned pumpkin, sourdough breadcrumbs, balsamic glaze, dried cranberries, and walnuts. I really love the warm and hearty flavors of fall, and often we think about that in the context of baking, but there are so many delicious fall dinner recipes, and the one I want to share with you today is an early fall pizza. So I am simply roasting a butternut squash. And I should add this side note that I prepared a lot of the ingredients for this pizza throughout the day because I'm roasting a butternut squash and I'm making some caramelized onions that you'll see in a minute. But here I am peeling and I am cubing up this butternut squash. So that way it roasts a little bit faster, but also when it's pre-cubed like that, you don't really have to worry about it when it comes time to put it on the pizza. And one little trick for getting the guts out of a squash like this is to use a grapefruit spoon. It can cut right underneath of the flesh a little bit and scoop it out in one swoop. I roasted the squash at 400 degrees for about 25 minutes or so, and I put them right on a hot baking stone, drizzled it with a little bit of olive oil, and added some salt and pepper. About halfway through, I took them out of the oven and just stirred them a little bit to make sure they were evenly cooked. And I let them cook until they were done, but maybe just slightly underdone because once they are on the pizza, they are going to cook again at 500 degrees. So I just want to make sure they didn't get mushy. And now I am caramelizing one onion. And just as a side note, caramelized onions are a great thing to make in advance and keep on hand because they're good on everything. So I prepared the squash and the onions earlier in the day, and now we are fast forwarding to dinner time, and I am making the base, which is a simple olive oil base. So this is olive oil with 1 clove of garlic from our garden, and then a little sprinkle of crushed red pepper. And I really wanted a flatbread pizza, but I did not feel like making flatbreads. I had some frozen sourdough pizza dough, so I shaped it into kind of like a giant flatbread and putting it on a hot stone. And now I am adding that olive oil base on top, cheese, butternut squash, caramelized onions, blue cheese, and a little bit of thyme. I also think this would be really good with either bacon. I have a homemade bacon recipe over my blog that you can check out, or if you have prosciutto on hand, you could put that on there and it would be so good. I baked this at 500 degrees for about 15 minutes and I turned it halfway through to make sure it was baked evenly. And then after slicing it, I drizzled it with a little bit of balsamic glaze. I did not think my husband would like the balsamic glaze on it. That's why I didn't put it on the whole pizza, but it turns out he loved it because this was delicious. I think anyone would love this pizza, and next time I'll just put the balsamic glaze right over the entire thing. When it comes to the fall kitchen and fall cooking, I mean, a lot of this is same old, same old. It doesn't matter what season you have dishes to do. And a lot of the ingredients we use are the same all year. But there are these parts of fall that are just so delicious and bring back a lot of memories too. So one of my favorite things to eat in fall is cottage cheese with apple butter. I grew up in the mountains of Maryland, and cottage cheese and apple butter is an essential. It's a staple for fall eating. So I am making a homemade cottage cheese, which is simply about 6 cups of pasteurized, not ultra pasteurized, but pasteurized milk heated to 185, about a third a cup of vinegar poured in once it reaches temperature, and a pinch of salt. Then just let it sit for 45 minutes or so before straining it through cheesecloth or a kitchen towel. And then my daughter and I made a game out of squeezing the whey out, which she really liked to do. So this is fun to do with kids too. In fact, I think kitchen projects with kids are always fun. They can be a little stressful sometimes too, but fall kitchen projects I think are a lot of fun because there's not as much daylight. We're inside earlier, so it gives us something really fun to do. So we are just refrigerating these curds overnight, and I will show you in a minute what to do to finish up the homemade cottage cheese. But now I am wrapping up the apple butter. So I am simply just giving it a stir. You can stir it throughout the day a few times, especially if you want your house to smell really good. And then at the last stir, about an hour or so before it's done, I am adding in about a tablespoon of homemade vanilla extract. And then at about 12 hours, I am using my immersion blender and blending this until it is smooth and the consistency that I like for apple butter. And now it is the next day. And so all I'm doing with these cheese curds is adding in enough cream to taste and breaking up the curds. It did need a little extra salt, so I put a pinch in there. And then I am serving this up with some homemade apple butter. And this is probably one of my all-time favorite fall breakfasts or snacks because it just brings back so many memories of my childhood. I am currently working on a fall pantry checklist for scratch cooking, so that way you can prepare your kitchen without even having to think about it. I will let you know when that is ready, but the best way to stay in the loop is to join the email list. I will leave a link for that in the description box below. I hope you and your family are off to the coziest and the best fall. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I will see you again next time.